Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Something to Talk About. For the last couple of weeks, we have had Michael Burke joining us to talk about vulnerability. For those of you who have not listened in on previous episodes, go back and listen to the first episode on vulnerability, and you'll hear more about Michael's background. But just in general, he is a person who has had a passion around the topic. He and I have talked about it for decades, and I think that it's something that is really getting to be a hot button for a lot of folks now. People are talking about it all the time, and I just wanted to delve into it a little bit deeper than just surface level. So today's episode, we're going to cover the aspect of vulnerability and its connection with resilience. I'm going to open this up by asking you, Michael, how are they connected?
Resilience. I think development, if you're working on being vulnerable, then you're developing yourself, and in developing yourself, that's a step in resilience and improvement and growing and being more open and being more honest, to me. Now, I haven't looked it up. I'm just reacting to the question that you asked me the way you asked me, right? So if I'm being more vulnerable, if I'm working on vulnerability or working on being more vulnerable, then I think I'm headed towards resilience by doing that, because I'm going to have to improve my self-awareness. I'm going to have to improve my willingness to take risk. I'm going to have to improve my ability to be criticized or potentially ridiculed, because typically when we're not vulnerable because we're expecting to get one of those issues coming towards us. So I think, as you develop and work on your vulnerability, I think you're becoming more resilient. That would be my answer. I don't know what the real answer is. I'm just telling you, when you ask the question, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, as I shared with you earlier when we were talking about it, I thought to myself, the first time I heard the term, theoretically, I felt like, yes, of course, you want to be vulnerable, you want to be open, you want people to know how you feel about things. But my reality is that I'm always not in that space, nor am I always willing to be in that space. And I had to ask myself, why is that? And as you said, it's because I didn't feel safe taking the risk of being that exposed in that moment with that person about that topic. And I wondered how many people question whether or not they even want to be vulnerable. Obviously, theoretically, the advantages are you get to experience life in its fullest with all your senses working. People get to experience you fully because you're allowing them in. I can imagine, though, that for some people, the notion of that is just frightening and they don't see an upside to it. So can we talk a little bit about that?
What part of that? The being afraid to be vulnerable, or?
Yeah, being afraid to being vulnerable, and really not so much the part about being afraid. I think we kind of all understand why somebody might be afraid. But let's talk about the real advantages, the gain that you get when you take that risk. Because nobody wants to jump off a cliff for just the sake of jumping.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that you mentioned earlier in our conversation in prep or in discussion was people, I think you used the term men, see vulnerability as a weakness, or people can see vulnerability as a weakness. And so that made me think, right? If vulnerability is a weakness, why does it take so much courage to be vulnerable? You know what I'm saying? It's like it takes so much strength to be it, right? And so it's almost I don't know if that's called an oxymoron or whatever, because I remember when I was on the radio show at HUR and they asked me about that. I never had that. I wish I could have, which is, if it's such a weakness, how come it's so hard for people to do it? And when you do something really hard, isn't that a strength that you've overcome something? So to me, that's where you left me when you asked me the question before we got on the show, right? And not being vulnerable means you're pushing your feelings away, right? So you're either pushing them away, or you're pushing them inside. So in other words, you don't address them, you just push them down and push them down. And so when you talk about resilience, if you're pushing your feelings away, can you be resilient in this category that we're talking? You're like doing the opposite of resilience.
Right.
Right. It's like one of the things I think, and folks, don't get me wrong, I'm gonna do this in partnerships, in relationships, right? When people get hurt multiple times in a row, or they have a tendency to close.
Right.
To not want to partner in relationship with somebody because of the potential of being hurt. When they do that, they're closed, right? And so if I'm talking to you in that time, I'm talking to a closed person. And so the challenge is I'm not really getting the real you, I'm getting the closed you at that time. So
right.
I wonder about that as it relates to, I think it's hard to be resilient if you know you're closing and intentionally close, right? Because now you're really shutting off your emotions so what's that relationship look like when you're completely closed and you're shutting off? Like people who are dating, but they're trying to date, but they're closed. I know this is where I was going to go, but it just reminds me. So now, the people are saying, I want to date. I want to meet somebody. You do. So it seems like I'm being vulnerable because I want to meet somebody, but I'm closed.
So you're guaranteeing that even if you meet them, you're not meeting them, and they're certainly not meeting you.
Or they're meeting the person.
Your representative.
That's right. Look at all the things that I'm going to uncover during the course of this relationship. Because what happens, if we stay long enough, then we start to become more trustworthy, maybe, right? We start to trust more if we're in a longer relationship. Maybe then you start opening up a little bit, right? So you're not letting it all out because you got this guard up, right? I'm only going to give this person just this much right now and see how they react to it. So we're in that game that we play versus I'm just open. Hey, this is me. I'm hanging. What are you doing? I've been hurt 1 billion times. Yeah,
and I've recovered. Recovered.
Yeah, or I don't really trust relationships, but I trust myself, and I'm just going to go with this and be real with it, and I'll react. You're going to get my real feelings and my real emotions, and I'm going to react to it the way I would react to it, knowing I'm taking the risk.
When you first start, go ahead.
This is one more thing. Look at the conversations you have when you're all the way open, like when you're just like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And people say, well, how do you feel about such and such? And you tell them the real feelings. Like, I was crushed. I was hurt. This really happened. But you're still willing to date? Absolutely. Okay. Do you trust me? No, I don't know you. I don't trust you yet, but I'm not afraid.
When you first started this topic and you were talking about how if you're not vulnerable in relationships and you go and you meet someone and you want to protect yourself from getting hurt, so you close yourself off. And I thought to myself, how many times have I done that and been around people who are doing that? And what it guarantees you is that you're never going to get the full-blown relationship because you're not even available to receive it.
I had a relationship once coming out of divorce. And my sister told me after time, she just said, Michael, your energy is it's a lot. because you're just so open to relationship and experience. And she said, I'm just not there yet. She was actually coming out of divorce as well.
Okay.
And I think she was maybe earlier in her process, maybe. I don't know. I just remember that. And I didn't really know what to make of that because I was just being me. I didn't think about myself that way, you know. But I got it afterwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I could have been something different towards her, but I really liked her. So I was just,
Let her see who you are
yeah.
and be and open so you can receive who she is.
There lies the challenge in being open, if you're just really open and you're clear about where you are and how you feel. If you're clear about your feelings, if you accept your feelings, right? Like in
Right.
my feelings, I really liked her. So I was living from there. Versus in the typical game that we play where you really like somebody, but you don't want them to know it because if the guy lets you know, if I'm the guy and I'm telling, and you already know that, then you got me. So if I let you get me, then you
Ugh.
know what I mean? It's all that stuff, right?
But it's such stuff. And I know that everybody, I shouldn't say everybody. I would think that most people would agree that people, you get tired of playing the game, the little, what was that? What is that dance they taught you when you were in grade school? Like, where you do the do-si-do and round the circle and stuff.
Ring around the
Every,
rosy, all that.
yeah, everything is so prescribed when it's the game. You only say this much and you do that much, and then at this point you can say and do something else. It just is such a waste of time, I think, most of the time, because I don't know how quickly you really even get to who you are. And I've been in situations where I was around people who really didn't know me very well, and they made some assumptions about how I was based on where I worked or what my job title was or where I grew up. They just thought they knew who I was, and they were so off. But because I was not willing to be totally vulnerable and stop them and say, oh, you got me wrong. Here's who I really am. And short circuit all that misunderstanding for so long, I could have saved myself a lot of aggravation and agita, right? But I wasn't willing to do that. And I think that that's very common, even amongst people who believe that they are being open. The key about resilience is, okay, because I thought about it after we got off the phone. And I thought, okay, let me just play this all the way out. I decide to be completely emotionally present, fully. And someone decides that they've met me with the sole purpose of seeing if they can take me out emotionally, which I think is a sick person anyway. I don't think people really approach folks with that in mind. Let me just see if I can get you. So I get hurt in the process.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly will not be the first time. And it may not even be the last time. But I've recovered. And usually on the other side of that healing process, I've been stronger and wiser. So why would I run from being vulnerable? I get hurt. But every day that you live, you run that risk. And so why wouldn't you, if there's an upside potential gain,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't you take the risk? Because you may get hurt. And you're going to get hurt. If you're going to get hurt, you're going to get hurt whether you're vulnerable or not, if you stay in it long enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, if you stay there long enough, you meaning we're gonna have sometimes we're gonna be hurt during the process.
Exactly.
Yeah, no doubt.
And you'll survive them.
You already have, just in different situations, right?
Right. So why do we line up so scared, so afraid, And then it brings on all kinds of other behaviors that we don't want for ourselves because we're trying to shut down. Some people turn to alcohol, other people turn to drugs. Or violent outbursts because they never gave themselves the gift of vulnerability. Because that's really who the gift is for. It's for you.
And well, you said you survived or you overcame, and that's resilience. I mean, so overcoming a pain, overcoming a hurt, overcoming something that impacted you in a negative way is resilience. And I think if you're working on being more vulnerable, then and you're doing the work, you're going to become more self-aware. You're going to not be so afraid of the risk that you would take. And by default, that is being resilient. If you're willing to take more risk than you took before because of what you've experienced and overcome, then you are being resilient. So I think vulnerability and working on vulnerability can lead, you will be more resilient as you open up, right? It's funny because I remember with my current wife, when I met her, or shortly thereafter, I used to say something like, I don't know what I said, but what I was saying was something like, we weren't even dating in her mind. And to me, I was like, I really care about you, or I really like you. And she's like, you don't even know me. And that just popped in my head, right? Because she was saying, you don't even know me, which is a thought. I was saying, I really like you, which is a feeling.
Feeling. Exact. Oh, you know what?
Right.
I hadn't even thought about that.
So, and she heard it as a thought. So she was saying, well, how could you really like me? You don't even know me. And I was feeling her.
Right.
Not thinking about if you know what I mean. I don't know.
I do know what you mean.
Yeah. Because I was knowing what I was feeling, my emotions when she stepped into the room, what I felt when I saw her, what I felt when I talked to her on the phone, when I asked her to go on a date and she came out the house and was bang. I was like, woo, girl. So I was feeling her, not thinking her, if
Right.
that makes sense, right? Because I was free in my own emotions at that state in my life, having done the work to be able to feel, right? So I wasn't talking about what I thought. I was talking about what I felt, but I didn't say it that way. I just said, I really like you. Right. And she said, well, you don't even know me. Interesting, an interesting juxtaposition when you think about it from that perspective. Right. And at the time, I think she was fairly closed because of what she had been through.
Right.
She wasn't necessarily even open. So she was in that, I'm not opening up to that anyway. So that kind of made her feel funny because she didn't like me saying it.
Well, and then did you find that you saying it and presenting a feeling was a trigger or an inspiration for her?
I don't know what it was.
Yes, you do.
Trigger or inspiration.
A trigger meaning to run from, but an inspiration to say, okay, listen, if I'm dealing with someone who is willing to be emotionally present for me right now, I'm going to meet him there as well.
Oh, hell no. She wasn't there at all. If that's the statement, hell to the no.
She was not there, huh?
No.
Wow.
Her friends thought I was a stalker or something. It was because where she was like, we ain't doing this. Right. And for me, it almost didn't matter what she thought because I was living from what I was feeling. I wasn't, and at the time, having gone through the work that I was doing to free myself emotionally, that's the only way I knew how to be. So I didn't know how to do it another way at that point. Just like, hey, my friends were like, yo, man, she's not, I don't know what you're doing. Why are you in this so long? Like, why are you hanging here? Like they were my male friends, my boys, right? They were looking at me like, what are you doing? You're crazy about her and she's giving you the, I don't know what I'm feeling, whatever. And they could see it, right? But for me, I was like, if at some point she decides she doesn't want to do it, at least I will have lived it fully.
Right.
From my side.
Right.
And that's the risk that I was willing to take. I don't even know if I saw it as a risk at that point. I don't think I see it as a risk. I think when you're living from your feelings, yeah, you can get hurt. Whenever you're living from your feelings, you can get hurt. But what's the risk of not, well, I don't even know how to say this the right way or how to say it so it makes sense for the audience, right? But if you think, and I'm doing relationships right now because that's just kind of two people connecting. I remember reading, what's the actress's name? Angela Bassett,
mm-hmm.
and her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And when they met and how much he was crazy about her. I mean, and when it's described in the book, it's just like, it's pure emotion. I mean, yeah, there's some logic in it and some stuff, but it's really just the emotional part of what he felt about her. And most people, I mean, the funny thing is when people see my wife and I out, strange people we've never seen before, right? We went out 2 weeks ago to a restaurant because we do date nights every Friday. 2 times. One place, this older white lady came up to our table and said, "You all are a beautiful couple." And we're just sitting here eating. We're not dressed in any kind of way. We're just having dinner. The next week, different restaurant, different place, somebody came up and said that to us again. Somebody we didn't know, somebody just out of the blue. "You all make a really nice couple." And I mean, it felt good to hear it. And my wife and I look at each other and like, what are we doing? Because we're just...
It's your energy.
Right? So, and I think people can feel it or people can see it or people can experience it. And for me, from where I was, that's just a beautiful thing to feel.
No, I agree with you. And I think, though, as you were talking and especially when you were talking about, you told her how you were feeling and she responded from a position of thinking. And I thought, wow, how do you know, or do you know? Maybe that's the first question. Do you know when you're responding from what you're feeling versus what you're thinking? Because sometimes if I stop to think about it, I would react differently than I do. I tend to kind of live in my feelings most of the time too. And so I'll be feeling some kind of way, and sometimes it's really off, but it's how I'm feeling in the moment, and that's how I respond. People like you who are, I don't even know if this is honest. I was going to say more pensive than I am. I think I am pensive. I'm just pensive on the back end. Sometimes I'll react and then I'll be like, oh shit, I probably shouldn't have said that. I probably should have reacted another kind of way and I should have thought about it. But I don't know how you train yourself to step out. You're giving me a look. I don't know what to make of that. How you train yourself to get out of your head and to get more into your spirit, your soul, and feel.
That train yourself is the part of the question that I'm trying to wrestling with right now. How do you train yourself?
Is maybe train isn't the right word then?
No, that might be the right word. When you say it, train yourself. I just know that when in therapy, they say a statement, then they say, how do you feel about that? And I remember when I first did therapy, my first round of therapy, when they asked me that question, I used to answer because I thought they always wanted an answer. My answer was usually what I thought about it, not what I felt about it. And even sometimes I didn't have a feeling. My feeling would have been, I feel uncomfortable. And if they would have said why, I'm like, I'm not sure. I need to let that percolate, and I'll tell you. Give me a minute to feel it, right? Because sometimes people ask you how you feel, and it's just maybe you don't know at that moment.
Right.
But typically you answer, and typically when you answer quickly, it's how you think. I think.
Sometimes it depends. I know in my relationship with people that I know really well and where I'm feel totally safe, even if it blows up, I still feel safe. They usually will get my feelings about stuff. They don't. That's my automatic response with them because I have decided, which is a head action, that they are safe for me. They've seen it all. They've loved me through it all. They've still been there in spite of it all. So I let them have all of it, the truth, the good and the bad, because everything that I'm feeling isn't always going to be pleasant, isn't always going to be wonderful.
Well, that's good that you can get to it that easily. For me, I might give you an answer and go to bed that night. And in the middle of 3 o'clock in the morning, my feeling is, I get to my feeling and I go, oh, I told Lynn I felt this way. But what I really feel is this, because I've had time to process it in my spirit and my thoughts and my heart. And I really have a different feeling. And I might call you back and say, you know what? I said this, but as I spent more time trying to figure out what the feeling really was, it's really this plus this, or I answered the question in a different way, because what I'm really thinking is, and what I thought about it, this is what came up for me emotionally. This is what I felt emotionally. Like, for instance, I might, if I'm really thinking about how I feel when you ask me the question, the feeling might be, I'm feeling rushed. And so I don't want to answer you right now.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
But getting to that feeling rushed might be just like, I'm feeling something, I don't know what it is. And I'm, oh, what were you rushing me? I need to spend more time with it. I don't know how I feel. I know how I think. I think it's a disruption, or I think it's this, but how do I feel about that?
Yeah. No, because we've had those conversations, and that has happened where you've said to me, wait a minute. Let me see how I'm feeling about that. Honestly, I'm feeling uncomfortable. And so let me, mull that over and see if that's really what I'm feeling. But oftentimes people will ask you, how do you feel about that? And they don't want to know your feeling. What they want to know is what you think about it. Really? You know? And
right.
So, and that's why I use the term training, because I think that the conditioning of most of us is prescribed.
The beautiful thing about working on vulnerability is when you take the time to really think about how you feel and try to touch the feeling, and the feeling comes up, if you work with that feeling and process that feeling, you're working towards resilience.
I see that. And when you work toward resilience, the outcome is always one you can live with. Because, as opposed to, I didn't think about it. I wasn't in touch with my feelings at all. This is something I just thought I needed to do in the moment, and it was a mistake. You know how there are some expressions that are telling. The expression "go with your gut."
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that that's talking about go with your feelings, your emotions around it, as opposed to processing it in your head, analyzing it logically, and coming up with a conclusion.
Yeah, probably. And you might have to adjust your gut at some point, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think your gut will automatically adjust. If you, I think those are, what do we call them in nature? Those are instincts those are feelings. Those are not thoughts. When a lion pops out from under a bush, you get nervous. That's a feeling. That's not a thought. Now you might have to quickly shift into thinking about what you're going to do as a result of that. But a lot of the instincts, I think, are feelings. I think so many of us have, through trauma, gotten away from our feelings. It's just hard to get there.
Huge impact for sure.
Say that again.
Trauma is a huge impact on our emotional self. Those things that have traumatized us emotionally, you try not to go back there. But again, if you process it, you heal and you get better, People, you just made me think of my dad, and I think about, I lost him in 2000, right? But I keep tapes in the car. I have CDs. My father was a big Lou Rawls fan. And my connection to my dad, sometimes I hear him in my head or hear him say something. And I might pop in like Tobacco Road.
Oh, wow.
Driving down the road, singing Tobacco Road as if he were there. Now, we all deal with loss different in different ways. Right. But that's how I deal with, trying to keep his spirit alive and other people that have been close to me that I really care about. I try to remember their sayings or say something they would say and keep them present, right? Others do other things, So just from that perspective, that kind of just feels good to me emotionally, that I'm still talking to my dad and listening to his music and remembering the times we sat around, singing those songs and listening to Lou Rawls with him and that kind of thing. So,
Now that you mention it, when you talk about resilience, when you've gone through a loss of any kind and you maybe in the moment to the public were not in your feelings, it's my daughter's favorite comment, Mom, you're in your feels. Mm-hmm. But if you process it wherever you do and get in touch with your feelings, it may take a while, but usually on the other side of that, I have found that I can look back and feel the good things as well as the sad things and be strengthened by them rather than drugged by them. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I get that loud and clear.
Because I was struggling with this whole topic of resilience. How does getting in your feelings really help you do that? And why would anybody logically want to be vulnerable anyway? If I were playing devil's advocate, but I can see now why things that 20 years ago would have taken me out, been there, done that, have gone through it before and know what works for me. Mm-hmm. In terms of how to deal with things. Like, okay, I tend to be pretty analytical. So I know that before I even get to my feelings, let me go process this through my head because I got to do that. And then once I can do that and come up with all question marks I can have, then I can feel however I'm going to feel about it. And I can usually move on. And maybe not that quickly, but move on because I've gone through the process. But I think we all develop, in terms of resilience, our own methodology about how we do what it is we do with our feelings.
Yeah, I think resilience takes tools, right? It's like part of, as you build tools to cope,
right,
you're working towards resilience. And each time you get a different tool, like I journal, or I speak in my phone voice notes when I'm thinking about something. It's like my journal, but now I can hear myself. Now I can hear myself speak it. Mm-hmm. And that's a tool that I use to cope, feel better, analyze my feelings and my thoughts. And that whole thing I put in the tape might be a whole thought, 30 seconds, a minute, whatever. And then I'll come back to and say, okay, Michael, what were you thinking? Now, what were you feeling about that? Or why is that an issue? Right? Because sometimes we're doing the work. You're doing self-therapy in a sense.
True.
Right. And I think every it's like doing the work is building tools for resilience. So whenever you sit down and say, I felt really funny about that, what was that about? And trying to process it on your own, which may be safer in the beginning as you're working on resilience, right? Working on vulnerability. It's probably safer to process it by yourself. What are the questions that you ask to make sure you process it? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? When did I feel that before? And that question right there, when did I feel that before? Or did I feel that anywhere else in my life at some other time in my life? Might take you back to 10 years old. Or, man, I remember a time when my uncle, he hit me. And I wasn't even talking to him. My wife, and I remember that. I was like, whatever that is, something like that, where all of a sudden you're picking up an emotion or a feeling where you were angry or hurt because of something that was done and nobody said anything to him. Right? So now you weren't even thinking about that because you're like 20 years past that. And
Right.
something else triggered that emotion. And the fact that you said, when did I feel that before? And boom, that thing comes up. And if you stay in that, you might need I don't know what the emotion will be. You might need anger. You might need go take a walk. You might need to go hit some baseballs or do some boxing. I don't know, whatever it is.
Or you could be sad.
Or you could be sad. Absolutely.
And you know what? And I think what I'm hearing you say is that whole grab bag full of emotions, from the ones that are, quote, socially acceptable to display and the ones that aren't, they are all ways that enable you to ingest every aspect of what you're feeling all the time. It's like all your senses are working.
And the feeling could have been like my aunts and uncles, my cousins were around, my peers were around, and I was shamed in front of them for something. Embarrassed. I didn't really do anything, and nobody stood up for me. So where does that take me? I like to be where people will defend a bad, something negative that happens when it's wrong. And I have some feelings about that. Y'all didn't protect me, but I never was able to tell you, y'all didn't protect me. You all didn't say anything. How come y'all didn't say anything? And to process that, I might need to go back to 3 of my cousins that were there. I was like, how come y'all didn't say nothing? They're like, what you talking about? That was 20 years ago. Right?
I'm still
man, I know. But it's, it just came up for me in some situation. And people look at you like you're crazy. Like, what? That just came up for you? Yeah, I'm doing deep dive,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you're really onto something, because I think that a lot of the stuff that you didn't get a chance to, I don't want to say process because that's the wrong word, but if something goes down and it puts me in my feels, now I have a new appreciation for my daughter's comments. Puts me in my feels. I need to stop. I don't have a problem feeling. I have a problem sometimes understanding it, shifting it from the feels to the thought process. And I'm too analytical to not do that. If I miss that step, I don't get the full value out of it all. But if you don't feel at all, I wonder, can you get any value out of it? I guess intellectually you can, maybe. But in a relationship, it's not all going to be in your head.
Well,
yeah, no.
I mean, if you put it away, if it's buried, it's in your subconscious.
That's in your head.
Yeah. So yeah, but it's in your head, but it's not resonating.
Right.
Right.
But it is resonating with you. It's just that it's resonating in a sneaky way because you haven't dealt with it. So it's there. You haven't run it through your feelings. You haven't felt it and dealt with it. And so another situation occurs that's similar, and there's that trigger.
Mm-hmm. It's like you're hiding unmet needs.
Right.
They're in shadow. We call that in shadow. That's the work that we do in the warrior program, right?
Okay.
Where emotions are suppressed, repressed, put into your unconscious mind. It was such a painful experience that you just shut it out for the last who knows how long.
Let me
And
ask you, the warrior program, isn't that tailored to help you build resilience? Isn't that the goal?
yeah, the whole goal is to try to be more authentic as a person in your person. Yes.
Okay, so the warrior program doesn't really work on helping people recognize and show up vulnerable.
The warrior program is about helping you be more authentic as a man, whatever your manhood is for you at that point in your life. And that typically has to do with dealing with repressed emotions or things that are in shadow. And typically you only have a weekend initially. So you typically hit something major that you're unaware of through the process,
Okay.
right? So you don't know when you go into the training, you don't know what you're going to find. As
Wow.
an individual going to the training, you have no idea. You think you're going on this weekend journey, but you don't really know what that journey, where
It's
that's
going to
going to take
uncover.
you or what you're going to uncover. And the process is so natural that what you thought you might have gone there to uncover, if you're thinking anything, you hit something completely different. I had a friend who, I'll use a different name. His name was Johnny, and his parents, when I met him, we were in our early 30s, and I used to go to his house from time to time, and his parents would call him Little Johnny. And it was interesting because he was 36 or 37 years old, and they were still calling him Little Johnny. But Little Johnny had a connotation of being little, like when you're 12. And they were almost treating him that way. And that really kind of
Bugged him
bugged me.
probably.
And he fell into Little Johnny when he came to the house. So I was watching this dynamic of Little Johnny and the parents treating him like Little Johnny, like so, almost like he wasn't respected as a man. That's what it felt like anyway, going to the house with him,
Wow.
right? So he was going through some changes in life, and he called me one day. He said, "What's that program you went to?" And I said, "You talking about Warrior?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I need to go." And so he signed up and went. I went on his training with him, and I watched him go through his process, and he was fighting the process. And I whispered to somebody, "Call him Little Johnny." And they called him Little Johnny, and the boy went off. And he went off around feeling like he was a kid, never being respected by his parents or his peers. I mean, just a whole deep dive into, lots of pain around his job in his world and the workforce, feeling like they didn't appreciate him for what he brought. And it was a whole cycle of things that little Johnny had repressed for a long time, right? So, obviously he didn't know that's what he was going to hit, nor did he think that I would be whispering in someone's ear, say that to him so that it would trigger his real emotion, because it just seemed like that's what he was fighting in that point. And I remember him coming out of the training and like a month or 6 weeks later going to see his parents and having a sit down with them around little Johnny. And
Wow.
and he changed that whole thing in terms of how they saw him, but he basically said, "I'm not little Johnny. I am John. I'm 37 years old, and you all need to recognize that as my parents." And whatever else he said, I wasn't there, but he kind of, he told me kind of what he said. So I'm just saying, repressed emotions can be something that happened over time for lots of reasons and that we don't understand. And when you get to the pain, I mean, he's a different person today than he was after that. And he only dealt with that one issue.
But I bet his relationship with his parents has changed substantially, because if that was that kind of a trigger and he'd never addressed it, they didn't know that there was a problem, probably.
Yeah, it changed dramatically.
Wow.
Yeah. Much more respect, much more as a man. And then he became the caretaker for his parents, literally.
Okay.
Little Johnny. Yeah.
You know, this whole topic of vulnerability is so deep, with so many layers, that while we've been trying to cover all of it in these podcast episodes, I always end up feeling at the end of another episode that there's more, that there's something that we've missed. Or
it's a broad topic. I think, you talking about it on something to talk about is probably going to open up a lot of lanes for a lot of people to think about their own vulnerability or lack thereof, and work they can do, which I think is a beautiful thing. Just bringing the topic to the forefront for the audience that you're going to have, and having different opinions about it. There are lots.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I was listening to something online earlier this week, and it was talking about mental illness and how some of the mental illnesses, many of them, the ones that aren't almost exclusively chemically based, are often tied back to a trauma that the person that experienced the trauma either was too young to understand and articulate and respond to, or if they were older, they pushed it back in the back of that closet that everybody stores all that stuff that you don't want to deal with. And how it eats at you, and it eats at your psyche. And over time, it can cause things like anxiety and depression and, narcissism, all kinds of things. And I'm hopeful that, particularly this topic, that the time we spend just talking about it will inspire people. Listen, guys, you're not going to get the answers from us in terms of how to deal with it, where to go, but you will hear, hopefully, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, you're going to hear enough about it to whet your appetite and to inspire you to continue to have these dialogues with your people, with your tribe, to do your own research, to ask yourself in those quiet times when no one's around, how in touch are you with your feelings, and how open are you willing to be, so that you can build up that muscle of resilience. I don't know. I can look at you and tell that you're feeling some kind of way about that. So do you want to share?
I think that was great. You just reminded me of a statement that Brene Brown says. She says, we can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both. And
wow.
She's the, researcher on vulnerability and the writer with several books. And I just think that's a great, that you just, when you said what you said, it reminded me of that line. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort. And I think courage is a great word for me to end on anyway, from where I'm at. I just posted an article on LinkedIn from HBR, Harvard Business Review, that talks about now is a time for courageous leadership, given where we are in the leadership world. Brene Brown just put out a new book, and I think it's called Solid Ground, which is about courage. One of the aspects of it is courage, and she's doing it in the leadership realm now in corporate America, with leaders around courage and vulnerability. And she talks about when she first went to a speaking engagement, and she was talking about vulnerability, and it was all CEOs. And she was freaking out because she never really talked to CEOs about vulnerability. But she did that first presentation, and then she started writing books about leadership and vulnerability. So she's
Okay.
got a whole vernacular around that. But I think that saying is good. We can choose courage or we can choose comfort, but we can't have both.
You just mentioned that you had posted an article. Can you repeat where that article is, so if the listeners want to go and research it and read it? Where is it?
I don't have on my LinkedIn, Michael Burke, LinkedIn. There's an article about courageous leadership and the 5 aspects of courageous leadership by the Harvard Business Review. I'm going to post another one within the next 48 hours regarding solid ground and the fact that 2 formable sources are talking about courage right now. And I think for vulnerability takes courage as well, because of shame and because of those kinds of things that we've dealt with. So courage is the topic for me for the next 30 days anyway. I'm going to be doing some review of courage.
Okay. Well, listen, that's a wrap for this show. And as I always share with you at the close of a show, we are not experts. It's just me and my friend talking. And I'm hopeful that we can be an inspiration to you for you to continue the dialogue after the show is over. So until next week, when we meet again to go over another topic on vulnerability, which may very well be our last one, take care. And we look forward to talking to you again.